Leaders, real life leaders.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And I'm so excited to have Rick Maurer back on our show. He's got a new book called Seizing Moments of Possibility. And so today we're talking about how to make changes so that your employees and 1099 contractors are on board with you. And our title is, Why Don't They Want What I Want? How to Avoid the Pitfalls of Change. So I'm so excited about this. And this hits home for me because I feel like for a while we made a huge change in our business. I mean, massive. Number one, we changed the name of our company. It was Chantel Ray Real Estate, and we changed it to Canzel Realty. And the reason why we changed it was because we felt like people like here's a perfect example. Our slogan was, if it has to sell, call Chantel. Well, that works for, a small team, and we decided to go national. And so when we go national, we needed a more generic brand. What we called it is, we call it a suggestive trademark. So when you think of, hey, instead of can sell, it's Canzel. So like, this company can sell my home, or can sell my home, is why we made it. And we felt like that was a big, great thing for our agents. The problem is in the state of Virginia, Chantel Ray Real Estate, we spent thousands. I mean, we were spending about $60,000 a month in marketing. And that name really resonated. So people were like, I don't want to change the name. Like, everyone knows Chantel Ray Real Estate here in Hampton Roads. Why would we change it? And that was a big change, number one.
Got it.
And
okay.
Number two, another big change we did was we actually increased our commission structure. And so you would think like, if that'd be like giving someone a massive raise, right?
Right.
But the only change that we made to that is we had less locations where people could go to. So we decided to make a more virtual company because we were like, this was before COVID happened. Everyone thought it was a great idea, and a terrible idea. And then COVID happened and they were like, oh, wow, that was genius, right? But when we first brought it out, COVID didn't happen. And we were like, we're going virtual. We're going to be using co-working spaces instead of regular spaces. And so people said, they're like, well, I need an office to work out of, and I don't want to work in a co-working space. So let's talk about those kind of changes.
Yeah.
What could we do because we were like, both of these things are a great thing for you, but how do we get the employees and the 1099 on board? So let's talk about that.
Okay. So which of those is the bigger one that you got resistance or reluctance or pushback?
I think the name change.
Okay. So let's just start with that one then. The way I look at support and resistance is support and resistance are two sides of a single coin. And so you're either getting support or you're getting resistance, and it's a sliding scale. Sometimes you have a lot of support, sometimes a lot of resistance. But there are three reasons for that. And when it's on the resistance side, it's, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying. It has nothing to do with their buying in. It just means, do they understand that you've just made a name change? That's a pretty simple one, right? They understand that. The bigger issues, and my hunch is the ones that are at play, are the second one is, I don't like it. And this is based on fear. There's something about the name change that might scare them. And I don't know what that would be, but it might be, wait a minute, we're really doing a great, amount of business with the Chantel Ray name. We were doing this and this, and now we're just another name out there. So there could be that kind of fear. The fear doesn't mean that fear is necessarily justified. It simply means if they feel that way, then they're going to act on that fear. If I'm afraid, that a flood is going to come into Arlington, Virginia, where I live tomorrow morning and wipe out our home, that doesn't have to be accurate. But if I believe it's true, I'm going to act on that fear. It's an exaggerated example. So I don't get it. I don't like the third one is I don't like you. And what that means is I don't really trust the leaders to come up with new ideas like this. And it can be, hey, you remember 2 years ago we did blah, 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 or this or that. And so any of those can get in the way of people fully supporting something, from anywhere from just dragging their feet to just, refusing to work. I can't imagine it's ever going to get that strong with a name change. But my hunch is that what's going on is that people do understand it, but there's something about that scares them, or they're kind of afraid that, wow, what are leaders doing? Why did they change that they're really confused? They're confused about the why of it and why there might even be a benefit to them. That would be my guess.
I love that. So let's give us an example of a company that you saw that made a large change and, on the outside looking in, kind of like that, like a name change or a huge shift in a commission plan. Like for me, I'll give you an example. This was a blessing because we gave all of our agents a massive raise, right? Like we were saying, we're doing a commission where, you have 100% cap and, we're giving you you're making a lot more money. So that's a lot easier to tell people than, hey, we're giving you less money or something like that. So let's talk about a change where you thought, wow, that's a big one. People are not going to be on board. And somehow the leadership came in and they were like, everybody got on board and was rowing in the right direction.
Yep. Okay. I got a great one. There's a small company, 90-person company in Vermont, I believe, called Rhino Foods, like rhinoceros, rhino. And they sell dessert ingredients to makers of dessert products, like they sell to Ben and Jerry's and others. So you would never hear about them as a consumer. I mean, they sell just to the industry. Family-owned business. I think Ted Castle's the name of the owner and the head. And he brought everybody together and said, folks, we are losing money. The industry is on a downturn. And we've done everything we know how to do to save money. And we are at a loss. And the only thing that I know to do is that we're going to have to downsize. Now, downsize is a level 2. That scares people to death. And he said, we've never done it before. I wish we didn't have to do it, but we're going to do it. So a lot of people have been in meetings like that where suddenly the leader says downsizing or something, and people get scared. What he did brilliantly, right after he said that, he said, look, if any of you have an idea that you think might actually increase revenue or save us money, I'm willing to consider it. I think I've thought of everything, but if you have something, I'm willing to consider it. That was just a little tiny add-on. 90 people. Based on that little add-on, he got 111 suggestions from 90 people. And so, he was overwhelmed. So he pulled people together and said, look, what can we do with this? And they ended up with like 5 big strategies that allowed them to move ahead with people 100% behind them. And they never had to lay off anybody. And 2 years later, when the industry dropped again, they just pulled that off the shelf and said, let's do that again. And it worked. So
what were those things? Could you share some of them?
The only one that this was a while back, the one that I really remember is that they wouldn't rent out their staff. I'm trying to think of the right word. But basically they said, look, we've got a lot of really talented people and we could contract them out to you, like to Ben and Jerry's, to do work. And so they were able to keep these people employed, and like the new employer, let's say it was Ben and Jerry's, paid the salaries, but Rhino Foods continued to pay benefits, so people didn't lose their benefits package. There were a couple of others, I don't remember what they were, but that was a big one. And it turns out to be a really easy one. So because people, their vendors did not want to be hiring more staff in a downturn, but they often needed people for a week or a month or 2 months. And so this was a really easy thing, like bring in contractors.
Yeah, so I think I remember seeing something like this. I think that Rhino does like the cookie dough. Like I think they make like cookie dough and then they sell that cookie dough to Ben and Jerry's for them to put in their ice cream.
Yep. I'm not sure. You're probably right about the cookie dough. I don't remember that specifically, but that's exactly the process. They're selling stuff that Ben and Jerry's can use in its ice cream. So,
Got it. Awesome. Give us one more example like that.
okay. This was in a finance department in a big company. And the head of finance said, we need to improve quality. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to get the hourly workers, or I guess they weren't hourly, but the non-management staff, giving them more responsibility so that people can actually be looking at where are the problems, how do we fix them, which is a perfectly logical thing to do. However, he left supervisors and managers out of the loop. And so they are furious. And so they're dragging their heels. They're not implementing this stuff. And he saw that, he saw the error of his ways. He knew they needed to do something to improve quality, but he also saw that he made a big mistake by bypassing the leaders. So here's what he did. He held a staff meeting of like 100 managers, and before the meeting, he gave everybody a couple of index cards, just regular old, go to the office supply store and buy some index cards, and said, write down any questions or any concerns you have about this new process that we're getting involved in. And don't sign your name, and get it to my office a couple days before the meeting. So he gets all this information. He's got time to look it over. So if anything is going to make him furious, like he's going to go, why would they say that? He can get over it before the meeting. So I was at the meeting. I wasn't at the meeting for that. I was there just giving a speech on a book that I just written. He walked into the meeting, not with a PowerPoint slide with bullet points, here are the key questions, because that would be pretty typical. He walked in with the stack of index cards. And there's something about him carrying the actual cards. You could see people kind of leaning forward. And he said, you gave me a lot of comments, and questions. I really want to go through these. And he would just pick up a card and say, okay, da 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 da. And sometimes he'd say, that's a great question. I hadn't thought of that. Other times he'd go, I understand your concern. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. But it became very clear that he was willing to hear tough questions and comments. In other words, questions at level 1, 2, and 3. I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't like you. And I'm sitting on the side of the room. And within about 20 minutes, people just started jumping in and saying, hey, Jim, what about the such and so? And suddenly he didn't need cards anymore because they're actually having a conversation about these critical issues. What he did by this simple purchase of, $1's worth of cards showed people that it was safe to talk about tough issues and that he was willing to take responsibility for what he had done. And people started, coming in and saying, well, we could do this, we could do that. And it turned into a very productive meeting. And the big difference was a simple mindset shift to him. And then he didn't hire a consultant to come out and do some fancy thing. He had index cards, for God's sake. I mean, it was that simple, and it turned things around. And part of that is he got lots of good ideas from those 100 managers in the room.
Hey guys, I'm so excited. My new book, One Meal and a Tasting, is out now. And if you order the book on Amazon, just the regular paperback edition, if you go in and make a review, you will get the audio book for free. Send a copy of your receipt to questions@chantelrayway.com and you'll get the audio book right away. So one of the things I know that your book talks about is kind of identifying those countless little moments during big projects that could turn dreary routine tasks into activities that actually engage people. So give me a real life example of something that would be an example you could share.
Okay. All right. I have a client. He's a nuclear physicist, and he works with other scientists. And whenever one of the scientists has a project that they need to take it before the body of scientists to say, so the organization can say, yes, we want to go ahead with that. We will provide staff and budget and all of that. And he said, the problem is these meetings are always the same. They always use slides, always use PowerPoint. And he said, the problem is if you don't use PowerPoint, it looks like you didn't prepare. So we have to use PowerPoint. And he said, you waste all your time doing these slides and reading through them. So what he did is he was so proud. He called me and told me what he did. He said, typically I would have used about 50 slides to cover this new idea. And I thought, what's the minimum number of slides I could use? And still they would say, oh, he's prepared. And he said it was 5. And he said, the amazing thing is I covered all the same material, but because I wasn't reading from slides, there was a lot more opportunity to have conversation. And people started engaging me, and asking questions, sharing concerns. And he said, you could feel the energy rise in the room. And he said, when the meeting was over, it was like, I had some people on my side. I mean, people were now taking some ownership in this. And what I love about it, it didn't cost him a cent. It didn't take an extra meeting. It was just, how can I use the time I have in a way that might be more engaging? Well, first of all, fewer slides. So it's the same audience, the same time of the day, the same bad coffee. Everything's the same, except he found a creative way to open up the conversation.
I love that. So I want to talk a little bit more. I know you have your book, Seizing Moments of Possibility, Ways to Trigger Energy and Form Momentum on your ideas and plans. I will tell you, what I think would have been a good title for you is the title of ours, Why Don't They Want What I Want? I think that's so good.
Well, thank you. Well, it's funny. I wrote a book in 2002 called Why Don't You Want What I Want? So it was just a variation on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
But thank you. I'm glad.
So let's talk a little bit more about one of the things I heard you say is, getting everyone together and kind of having a meeting to get their buy-in, right? So like if it's, like here's the change that we want to make, or before you even make the change, before you even say, here's the change,
yes,
you basically are saying, here's the issue that we're coming across. So like for me, with the name change, I could have said, here's the problem. Like our slogan says, if it has to sell, call Chantel. Well, we want to go national and we want it to be more of a suggestive trademark. We want it to be more of a generic brand. We want it to not be as mom and pop. What are your suggestions? Like not even saying, hey, we're thinking about doing a name change. This is the issue. Now bringing it to everyone and saying, so is that what you're suggesting?
Well, first of all, you just made an extremely important point that rarely gets talked about, and that is you wanted to engage people before you thought up the idea. And so often organizations will say, okay, hey, we've got a name change. And now people are going, why are we doing this? And also they got to understand the name change. And it's much better to bring people in when they say, look at this. Look at how our referrals are going down, or look how whatever is going on, so that you could say, you could even say, hey, here's some stuff we're thinking about, like maybe a name change, but would love to hear your ideas. And that you don't necessarily make it a thing where you take a vote with all the people, but you say, I really want your input. And it's perfectly legitimate to say, I'm thinking about a name change. And here's the reasons. I think you just articulated that really clearly, Chantel. But the people know, first of all, they're able to engage with you like, oh, yeah, that's a challenge. Wow. As we go national or expand our reach nationally, that's a real problem. So that they're with you already. And now you're saying, you got any ideas? Or what do you think of my idea? it's really respectful of people, and it can really cut out a lot of the resistance that happens in a lot of changes. And it's just treating people the way we would like to be treated.
Give us one last tasting of your book. If there's one thing where you'd say, my favorite part of the book is, and I think it's the best part, give us that little nugget for us to take away for today.
Yeah, that's great. The little nugget is, I say that we as leaders need to be more like baristas. That when I go to my local coffee shop, which is open again, I get in line, and invariably there's somebody there who's ordering a latte. And I've never heard that person go, hey, give me a latte, but hold the milk. Because you can't do that. There are two essential ingredients in a latte, and that's steamed milk and espresso, period. You can have, chocolate shavings, all that, but the two essential ingredients are milk and coffee. And a good barista makes it in a way that you can't tell where the coffee ends and the milk begins. I think every meeting, every phone call that we do related to some new project, we need to say, how do I blend the human part into what I'm doing? And you can do it as simply as the guy I talked about who just reduced the number of slides, or somebody else said, I'm going to hold a meeting, I'm going to have people do index cards. It can be really simple stuff, but you want to make it comfortable and easy. And what I would not do is start scheduling extra meetings, because that just becomes a time suck. So I would say, think of the thing, are you acting like a good barista? Are you really able to blend the human part into all the technical stuff? And that's really the key to the book.
Hold on, because you confused me for a minute.
Sure.
There.
Okay.
So you said, like, don't do too many meetings about it. Like, just explain that one more time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't mean it that way. I mean, sometimes we schedule extra things for planning meetings and for letting people know what's going on. And that can be useful, but I would start smaller. I would take that routine meeting that you got with your team on Tuesday morning and say, how can we put more energy into that meeting? What can we do to make that, a more vital, kind of enriching experience? How can I do that presentation to other scientists in a way that might actually engage them? So you're doing start with doing what you're already doing and finding, how can I do that in a more engaging way? The former head of Scandinavian Airlines, Jan Carlson, said every day we have thousands of opportunities to engage our customers differently. They've lost their luggage, or they're afraid they're not going to make their flight, or they're whatever. And every one of those he called moments of truth. It's a chance for people to go, wow, I love this airline. Southwest used to be that way in the United States. I'm not suggesting they've gotten bad, but they used to have a real reputation for that kind of, wow, they really are looking out for us.
Well, what's funny is I feel like, with COVID, it's kind of an easy thing for people to make change. Like, for example, it's like, let's say someone I know, like, there's a Chinese restaurant and that we used to go to, and they used to have these like delicious marble chocolates, like when you leave. And so now they don't have it, and they say it's because of COVID, but it's kind of, don't you feel like people are kind of like abusing it a little bit? It's like, even like the mints that were like individually wrapped. It's like, oh, we don't do that anymore.
I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that's probably true.
It's like, worst case scenario, you blame it on COVID.
I love it. That's great.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been great. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Okay, sure thing. The best way to find me is my website, because all my contact stuff is there, and it's rickmaurer.com, and it's RickMaurer.com. And the book that you mentioned, Seizing Moments of Possibility, the ebook version is free, and it's available on my website.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah. By the way, there is a paperback version and an audio version available on Amazon. But I wrote this because I wanted it to be free. And so that's why I'm not selling it on Amazon, because you have to put a price on it. I want people to use it. I want them to tell their friends about it and see if it's practical. So.
Well, you are so generous. Thank you so much for being with us. And you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.